All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being here this morning. And I believe that Mr. Stoney Blevins is going to kick us off on our first item, which is the care management update. Stoney, thanks for being here. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to come before you guys today and talk about two programs that collectively we call care management. And I do have for you guys a couple of handouts. I'm not going to spend time running through that handout, but just to give you a brief overview, these are Medicaid programs for at-risk women during pregnancy and then for at-risk children in the first few years of their life. And so anyone who's on Medicaid and who is pregnant is potentially eligible for these services. The obstetric care management, or OBCM we call it, is the service for pregnant women. These services are delivered primarily through providers. So the care managers are actually housed in practices. So a care manager would be, for instance, at Mayhew, where the large majority of our Medicaid births occur, to work with mothers there. They could be in private OB practices. I believe, Jan, help me, we might have one at our FQHC that the county supports. So anywhere these mothers are receiving their OB care, we have these care managers to help them with more of the social determinants of health, a word that's become popular. Then on the CC4C, Care Coordination for Children, these are children that are born. They could transition straight from the OBCM care to this care. And these are children that are at risk. And again, we're helping them with more social determinants of their health. And these care managers are also located in practices in Buncombe County. So they may be sitting in pediatrics. They may be sitting in family practices. We can also meet with them other places. Perhaps they would meet with a family at the WIC clinic. And of course, they can also do home visits if they want to. So those are the core of those programs. And I will say about CC4C, that's also a program that we intersect with in our child welfare section. We have some prevention staff, and we work together around prevention cases to keep kids from entering the child welfare system. Also, foster children are very likely to receive this service once they're in care and they're in that age group, to make sure they're connected to primary medical homes. And then finally, every child in the county that's born with substance use. So if we have a child born with illicit drugs in their system, then 100% of those cases get referred to the CC4C program for an outreach to see if we can connect those families to services. So you can imagine the partnerships in the community are Child Welfare, MAHEC, CCWNC, Project CARA, our prevention staff. So it all kind of works together to form this safety net for this very, very vulnerable population. So that's just an overview of what the services do. Where I really want to get to with you too is these discussion points. So CC4C started in 2011, and these programs had different names and a little different function before that. And this really, in some ways, was one of the first Medicaid managed care programs before Medicaid went to managed care. So the money, the best way to think about it in those days is the money went from the state to Community Care of North Carolina, which is a managed care management agency, to their local affiliates. And then those affiliates would take those funds and transfer them over to public health departments, and the public health departments would provide the staff. So they would do the boots on the ground work. CCWNC in our area would do the administration, would transfer the money and do some quality oversight training, those kind of things. In Buncombe County, we took the model, 2 counties in North Carolina did this, of really, do we need to transition that money that many times? And so we just allowed CCWNC to keep the funds and hire care managers, and then we actually entered into contracts with them from the other direction to even enhance those services a little bit. Like we have bridge counseling through CCWNC. Our prevention staff were working closely with them. We had a small contract in place so that we could get the data they had for us to use in these substance-affected infant cases. So we've had a very close working relationship with them since 2012, and it's been working really well. So we weren't necessarily looking to change that relationship, But then this little thing is happening next fiscal year called Medicaid Transformation. And it's going to completely change the way these programs are delivered for every county in North Carolina. So for us, as of February 2020, CCNC will no longer be receiving these funds. So they will basically be cut out of this program, and all the funds will go to the PHP, the prepaid health plan. So they will manage the care management funds. But for 3 years in the legislation, public health departments were carved out so that these PHPs must contract with local health departments to provide these services. Now, in every other county, well, except for 2, in 98 counties in North Carolina, it's going to be pretty much business as usual, other than they will have a different funding strategy. Their funding will come from a private insurance company rather than CCNC. For us, it's a major change because we've not been providing these services. Our partner was. But our partners, in essence, will no longer have access to these funds or to be able to provide these services. We did our due diligence. We began to look into every possible option. Could we continue to contract with CCWC to provide these? Could we receive the funds from the PHP, contract back to them, a little different than what we're doing, backwards from what we're doing now? We thought we had basically worked that out, and we got a little curveball in the fact that CCNC, the state organization, severed its ties with the local provider. So CCWNC is no longer a part of the Community Care North Carolina network. And that's all because of transformation as well. So CCNC, the state organization, is having to remake itself and go in a different direction so that they can thrive in the transformation world. CCWNC is trying to stay alive as a standalone 501c3 organization, but really, other than keeping their same name, they're really starting over. I mean, they're a separate, standalone nonprofit now, and it created an interesting dynamic for us in that really the model we're using is not, as of March 1st, when they separated, we really got in a situation where we're legally responsible for providing these services, not them as a nonprofit. But because the relationship is so strong, they've built a bridge that will last basically until July 1st between CCNC and CCWC, even hiring the same basic executive director to manage and consult. But that leaves us with a difficult decision to make as of July 1st, with Medicaid Transformation looming in February. We either had to contract with someone, it didn't have to be CCWC, to provide these services July 1st, and this was somewhat of a surprise to us, or we needed to reabsorb them ourselves. Honestly, and this is very rare, when we looked at the math, we actually could do it cheaper than the nonprofit. And that's a little rare in government, but you have to realize that as a brand new standalone nonprofit, they lost all their infrastructure support they had when they were connected to the larger organization. So they lost their IT, they lost their clerical, they lost all that administrative and management support they had. So to function at the level they were really was going to be more than we could do it as a county. So we brought this to Averill when we first got here, and we believe that we can manage these programs revenue neutral. So that's where we are today, is we're pushed to make a decision July 1st in anticipation of Medicaid Transformation, and it would really keep us from having a double shift come February when we would have to look at another transition. So the proposal that we have is that really we be allowed to build this into the budget proposal. So it's not anything we necessarily have to vote on today, or in the future, but we would like for you guys to know that that will be in our proposed budget, and it really will look like an increase in FTEs. But we just wanted you to understand we're actually really not adding a new program. We are assuming responsibility for a program we were able to provide a different way, and it will be revenue neutral. In fact, we'll take the Medicaid funds, and the only reason we can do it that way, and they can, it's nothing against them, is we do have that infrastructure. So I do have clerical assistants that I can put to that program. We can handle the billing. We can handle the IT needs. we can handle the scheduling, which will allow those care managers to just go out in the community and do what we're paying them to do. So I want you guys to understand that when you saw what might look like an increase in 9 FTEs in our budget, is really a continuation program with a different service delivery model, where we assuming that service delivery that we have done elsewhere.
In addition to that, because we need to start July 1st, we're gonna look to fill those positions starting in June, so that July 1st will be up and running. So one is Tony, to make sure you understood, we're not increasing the budget, we're taking the money that's been coming to us, but since CCNC has gone away, the western portion of it is coming in-house now. So you will see an ad in the paper or however you wanna advertise for those 9 positions beginning in June, so they could be staffed and ready to go July 1 when the budget is in place. Thanks, Tony.
If we don't post them, thank you, sir. If we don't post them now and make conditional offers, those offers would be conditional upon the funding being approved July 1st. When July 1st will come, if I wait until then to post, I'll go for months where I have no way about the service for the legal responsibility. So we did want to get ahead of it, post, make conditional offers, and then in the new budget year, we'd have people that could actually start, hit the ground running. And our real goal is that the medical providers, the OB docs, the pediatricians don't feel like, even though we're changing administration, we don't want them to feel that pain. And then even more importantly than that, I don't want the citizens who are receiving the services to go without service while we transition from one provider to another.
Did you have any questions for us? Thanks, Tony.
Thanks for the update.
So I got my dynamic deal here.
Sounds like a press conference.
Wait, hang on, who's the guy in the tie?
Rare appearance.
I'd like to focus on the shoes.
It's the best way to wear it. Chucks, yes.
I am jealous. So Josh and I wanted to take just a few minutes to update you on kind of what's happened since we last talked about the Anchor Recreation project, but more than anything, talk about what's happening next. So when we talked to you on March 3rd, you authorized us to move forward. Since then, we've had some really good discussions. End of the story is that we finalized all contracts that we needed to with all related stakeholders, so UISO, MUSCO, the purchase order agreements. We began discussions with Duke on parking lot lighting, and we project that those are going to come in significantly lower than what you authorized us to do, but still working on that. So just wanted the whole board to be aware that we've sort of closed the book on the contracts and we'll be moving forward shortly. With that said, Josh wanted to talk to you about literal next steps on the project and what you can expect as we move forward.
So we've already communicated to Musco that we've signed the purchase order of the supply contract. They were told that yesterday afternoon. They've already spun things up and are working with MB Haynes, who's going to be the installer for those fixtures. And we anticipate getting an updated schedule based on the delays with the contracts. At the same time, we've also purchased the lights for the Buncombe County Sports Park, and we're continuing to work through dropping phase 3 power, which is a requirement for getting those lights functional. And we're working with ABYSA to develop some timelines on when we can take their fields out of operation and begin the turfing project. As part of that, we're trying to understand what the best route for bidding that project out is and how we need to go about doing that. So we have some meetings that we're going to be setting up with our purchasing department, ABYSA, and some turfing installers within the next few weeks, so we'll have a better idea. ABYSA is pretty flexible in terms of when they can move forward with the project. We're hoping to do it as quickly as possible while minimizing the season impact. Several of you remember from last year the impact that the Carpetbagger lacrosse tournament placed, so we're trying to get outside of that window, make sure the sports park is still available for that. So that's where we stand at this time.
A big part of Josh's challenge moving forward is sequencing. We can't put down turf and then put large vehicles on top of that turf, so we just need to make sure that we're thinking it through, and Josh has got that handled. So, do you have any questions?
So this is a victory dance.
Yeah.
I can see by your expressions.
I don't have any questions. I just got a comment. Want to thank you guys for your hard work. You know, these things just don't happen overnight. Projects have been, you know, years, and so it's reasonable to think that contracts and things may take weeks or longer. And y'all done an amazing job on it. The county thanks you, the community thanks you. It's a really, really big, it's just a big deal, and we appreciate it very much.
We appreciate your support.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
I do have one question. It's really not about the park so much, but the about the transportation infrastructure, which is part of the overall project. I think I mentioned this, Tim, I think when I saw you, but just so curious to any update on this. I heard that some of the business customers over there, some of the manufacturing folks, may have, you know, our hope is that once the road is finalized, that they'll be able to use that to get out to, you know, the highway, not going back around through the neighborhood, so to speak. So we want to make sure that everyone's going to feel comfortable using that. I've heard some concern that some of the businesses have said will still use the traditional route for exiting the industrial facility. So do you have any updates on that, or is that something we still need to explore to understand if that's an issue?
It's something we still need to explore. My guess would be that the folks are assuming that the road would be of similar size as what comes in off of Sand Hill. But the engineering has long been designed to be a much more substantial road.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's probably the difference.
Okay.
But I'll definitely follow up with some of the folks in the park.
Great, so thanks.
So I would probably comment out on that too, Chairman. I've heard kind of more the other way if the information is presented to them, that the size of the road and the scope of the road, you know, and I think they'll use it. And I think that's normal, so that people are used to taking a certain road, but you know, I think they'll be utilized. And I think you heard some chatter from maybe a warehouse or something out there, and then they changed their mind and said, oh yeah, we really like the idea of, you know, going across the bridge. So I think that's, I think as it moves forward, that a lot of that'll go away.
Well, hopefully so.
I do too.
I mean, it's a shorter route,
It's
and
a
it
lot
avoids that bottleneck. So intuitively, you would think people would want to. I just want to make sure that there's no design or engineering issues that might create an issue that we, you know, could solve for. So just kind of running that down. Great, thanks for the update.
Hey, Tim. One thing, over the weekend, I was out there, successful ball tournament this weekend, and I helped them out for a little while on parking, and the whole road was packed this weekend, and the business worked very good with them, letting them use their Wicked Weed, New Belgium, all that. What are you hearing about? They're looking for more room to park now.
So I've had some initial discussions on that with EYSO, and EYSO understood that any additional parking would be a cost that they would have to assume. However, they do have an interest in potentially using some of the property and sort of taking an easement so that they could build parking if necessary. And so I've discussed that with Fru and Josh and others as well. So I think as long we can work together on that, because we recognize that parking would be an issue, but the key being cost goes to EYSO and the developer. So. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, so what you've got is a one-page summary of a Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board with a little bit of information on its proposed structure and purpose. Just starting with the structure, we're looking at a 9-member board with at least one appointee from each district. The purpose of the board would be to make recommendations concerning the construction improvement of buildings and structures for recreational needs, assist in our public engagement and outreach efforts related to implementation of the Buncombe County Greenway Master Plan, to keep us apprised of marketing, public communication strategies, help us develop funding strategies and priorities of recreation-related capital improvements, make recommendations regarding our branding and image for the department, and advocate for and promote the department's recreational service offerings. With that, it's pretty base in terms of what we're offering here. We'd like to see obviously a wide array of experience on the board, and or something that's reflective of the community demographics as a whole.
Great. Sounds terrific. Any questions or preliminary thoughts from the commission?
I'm excited to see this moving forward. Just a point of clarification, would this board engage on issues of programming as well? So for instance, the programming work on Special Olympics or other programming all over, or would it more be the capital side of the house?
We don't do an incredible amount of programming. We're mostly a facilities-based department. I think as we expand that, that's something we can certainly include. The only issue with Special Olympics is that's kind of a weird partnership where we're basically a franchisee for the state and national organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would certainly look to advise or have that group advise us of where we needed to improve our programming, expand our programming, maybe drop some events. The way that I envision it is it'll work as sort of a funnel for public input where we will use the board to engage a wider audience that we wouldn't naturally be able to reach.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll say y'all do an amazing job. The Special Olympics every year is wonderful. And the worst thing that could happen to that is for us to get in the middle of it and mess it up. So, yeah, I mean, no offense to the board, y'all, but y'all do an amazing job with that. It's just an incredible, if you've never had the opportunity to go, you need to go, because it will, as we say where I live, it'll bless your heart. So, I mean, it's a great, great program. I got a couple comments. One is I have been since day one, been a proponent of the recreational side and investments in recreation based on the ability to afford that as in the county. I would challenge all of us to move towards looking at what other counties are doing, what other states are doing, you know, in meeting the recreational needs. You know, what gets a lot of attention in the last few years, has gotten a lot of attention, has been the Greenway side of this. And I'm not going to say that I'm against that, because I have supported that where it makes sense. But I think that we have financially financially not kept up in some other areas. And we need to be able to advocate for that, and we need to make sure that when this board is formed, that we have people that understand, you know, the park side, understand, you know, the playgrounds, what's the educational side, like I appreciate the fact that the Hominy Valley Trail system there will be educational, and, you know, challenge the board to really look at that very, very carefully. And also have equity in the funding. You know, there are poor communities in this county, in districts 1, 2, and 3, that, in my opinion, have been left behind. Not no fault of Josh or any of our team members there, but just it's a vision issue. Sometimes when we get outside of the county, we start comparing ourselves to others. We start defending our current position, and we don't need to do that. We need to get that aside and just go look at the models and what's working. And, you know, one of the things that's a challenge now, and gosh, I'm trying to remember where I was recently. I was out of the county, I know where I was. I was in Tennessee. And Where's Valley? Okay, and Where's Valley? Went by, and, you know, I'm a grandfather with 2 really little grandchildren, and one of our big things when we travel is we look for parks. You know, we'll Google them on our phone. Where are they at? And we'll go that way if we want something outside. And one of the things I noticed, and Josh and I have actually had a conversation about this, is that there was these large poles bordering around the playground. And I told my wife, I said, look, they're getting ready to put awnings over those. They're getting ready to cover them so people can actually use them, you know, when they're hot. You know, and I'm a little on my soapbox, so I apologize. I'll get off of it in a minute. But I'll give you an example. If you go drive by Deaverview, drive by that community center, you'll see a playground that is made of plastic, which is great, looks awesome. But in the summer months, you won't see anybody on it because it's just way too hot. And so I challenge us in making sure that people can utilize these, and that we look at the expense of that, you know, and because everybody else is doing that. You know, they don't just build a playground and they go, oh, look, we built a playground, and then nobody's able to use it, you know, year round. So I just challenge us to look at that, and you know, when we talk about, you know, Greenway master plans and things like that, that's a big, just realize that is a big topic that a lot of people like to talk about, and I don't want us leaving out these poor communities, and I challenge us over the next few years to really look at this as a board and as a department. So I'm off my soapbox.
Josh, thank you to you and your team for this. I'm personally very excited to see that Greenways are gonna have a voice and have their opportunity to be heard on those needs. And from the conversations that I've had with a number of those folks, the areas that are lower wealth are definitely on their radar. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. And I'll echo what Joe said. I mean, you know, because it is parks and greenways and recreation, right? So there's, because some places have just, you know, just like a recreation advisory board focused on, you know, sports and, you know, other kinds of outdoor recreation. Some groups have just a greenways commission. So this group will have responsibility for kind of, you know, looking at all of that. So we don't want it to just do one or the other. We're gonna, you know, kind of get all those folks together, and so we want to have a diversity of interest on there. Some of the folks may be more sports oriented, others might be more greenway oriented, but hopefully we'll have I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in this, so hopefully we'll have a great diverse group of folks to talk about this. And you know, and I think predictably, if we do create this kind of commission, I mean, folks who get in here, you know, they I'm sure they'll, you know, they're going to want to elevate these issues and talk about them. So I think it should be a great way to, you know, put additional focus on some of the parks and recreation opportunities in the county. So thanks for drafting this, and we'll look at this at the next meeting.
Yes, so our goal then would be to advertise for membership so that you can appoint from different. I wanted to make sure we saw the last bullet, because we're looking for a good geography. Everyone from every district should be represented at the table. And then Josh had some specific strategies he wanted for recreation or for youth and whoever's at the table, to make sure we have a good diverse group to give the staff direction and some advice on how to best move forward with our assets that we currently have. So.
Well, and not to say one thing, to not be hung up on a deadline on this,
Right.
about filling a board.
Right.
Because what happens sometimes is you end up with the people that are, you know, they're end up with some of the same folks, same areas, same interests. You know, and we may have to go and talk somebody into being on the board, you know, that we know has that kind of, we know they're in a certain area, or they have a heart for certain things, but they hate serving on a board. We may have to go, you know, and I think of Coach Wilkins that used to be at the Asheville High, and, you know, lives out where I live, and he's, you know, so anyhow, some names, and I'm not saying we should go after those people, that name just popped in my head, but there's some, just don't get hung up on having to do it by a certain time.
Right. Now, what you'll see next week will be the actual formation of a board, not who will be appointed to that at that point in time.
Right.
Then, after you form the board, then we can advertise for membership. But we need to form the board. We don't currently have that structure. Pardon?
9-person board.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did design it so that if we're short people, we can still run the board and maintain a quorum, so we can build it as we're moving along.
My only other comments at this point are, I definitely think, you know, having at least one person from each district sounds good. Really, but it'd be nice to have.
You need 3 from each
I like
district.
having three.
You don't need to pile Asheville in the middle of it, or Black Mountain, or other areas. You need 3 from each district.
That'd be
We've
good.
got 3 districts. That's the way you play it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It makes sense.
We were just in a minimum of at least one, so that you're right, you couldn't have front loaded in any one area. So at least have a minimum, but we can definitely go back and make that a bigger group.
Well,
You don't need a bigger group, it just needs to be 3 from
Right.
each district.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I do have, I think it would be good certainly to have more than one person from each district as a fact. I would be a little bit concerned. I mean, on our boards today, we don't kind of mandate that, through all our different boards and commissions. So I don't know, I would want to think that through a little bit more before deciding that. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying, I'm just raising the question, like,
Brandon.
going forward, should we say we're gonna, have a requirement like that? I don't know.
You do on the land.
We all run for district, and I have, and so does Ms. Edward. We have Warrensville all the way through, down the Broad River to Leicester, in them areas. Then they have another district that works all the way out to Inca and all that area. So, the way I look at it is fair, is each district understands what they need, as far as Greenways or whatever. And that's why I want 3, and then you got the Asheville area, which is part of this down here.
Well, I'm just saying, we, like on the affordable, on the early childhood, we've got all these different boards and commissions. Do we want to start making that a strict requirement for all the different ways we do citizen input? And I'm not saying no, I'm just raising the question, and I think there are some pros and cons to it. But Avril, were you about to say we do that on another board now?
Yes.
We do that with the library board.
With the library
3
board?
from each
Okay.
district.
All right.
Yeah. I think it's, I think sometimes it might require a little bit more work on our part of recruiting folks sometimes, But I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, it's a good idea for the library. It'd certainly be a good idea for this board. Because we just got diverse needs throughout the county. We really do.
How many folks are on the library board total?
9.
I think didn't we increase it?
Well, it was originally gonna be 5.
Yeah.
And you
And
went to
then we went to
9,
9?
and you loved
For
all
some
9 of
reason
them,
I
so
thought
we
we
put all
went
9
higher
of them.
than that.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was
3
from
from
each
each
board.
district is how you did the interviews.
Okay, thank you.
So my last comment is, I think this is going to be valuable. I do also appreciate how much work doing these kind of citizen, these are meetings, right?
It's a
Every
lot of
meeting
work.
takes a lot of organizing and preparation. So I don't think we have specifically said here in the document how frequently the group will meet, but I think that's something that, some groups meet every month, some meet less frequently. I don't think we have to necessarily decide that
I agree.
at the outset, but I don't think we should automatically assume it's every single month, because these are a lot of work, and we want these to be kind of enabling and advancing these kind of things, not bogging us down. So kind of finding the right balance on that.
Yeah, some people won't sign up for them if they think it's, oh my gosh, I gotta come every month. I think it's, that. Every 3 months. Yeah, I think that board should have some
Say so.
say in that, and, we certainly don't need to shove that in. Agree with that.
The only thing I'd like to caution us on, and let's make sure, true, that all of our districts are represented, but let's too look at the talent, the people who we need to make this board work. Now, I agree where people live, but I'm a good example. I live in District 1, I've always lived in the city of Asheville, but I'll put my knowledge of Buncombe County in the different areas up against anybody's. So we can't just limit people, even though we want to make sure that every area is represented. But let's be careful, because if we're going to get the most out of this board, let's remember we're looking for the talent and different people to bring together who will make it work. That's what I say.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Josh. Okay, and next up is Mr. Dane Peterson.
Hello,
Hey, Dan.
Bye.
Brevin Center. Hope everybody's doing well today. No handouts today. So, a brief update on the previous conversation we had at the last pre-meeting regarding the residential collections in unincorporated Buncombe franchise agreement. So we got to work right away after we spoke with you, the board, during the last pre-meeting, and have been negotiating with Waste Pro. And we as the evaluation committee, through the evaluation process, there were questions generated. There were some clarifications that we needed to work through with Waste Pro, And so we had representatives from Waste Pro come in April 11th last week and talk with us. I felt like a very good Q&A session where a lot of the questions that we had regarding, for example, communications, service levels, lessons learned that they've seen over the past 10 years that they've worked this contract. There was a lot of good back and forth on getting an understanding of where we are now and what we're looking at to transition into a new contract. So where we're at this point is we're still communicating with Waste Pro. There are still some data points that we're looking to get feedback from them on as far as the technology, the service verification in the field, and also some costing structures with additional carts, things like that, to make sure we've got a very good understanding of the.
You say carts? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, rollout carts,
Yeah, okay.
toters, if you will. So, and the contract that you will be seeing, we're working to structure that now. We're working with, staff is working with the legal team to make sure we're obviously incorporating the RFP that we put out, Waste Pro's proposal, but also the terms and conditions that is going to make a good contract for the 5-year term that we're looking to identify there as the base term with extension options at the end of that, 2-year extensions. So obviously that is incentivized with performance. That's where that would need to be in that term. So, and the model that has been identified by our committee during the evaluation has been the subscriber-based model, where citizens in the unincorporated area have the option to subscribe to the service, and also the rollout cart program, where everyone is provided a contractor provided waste container and recycling container.
So I want to pause there real quick and ask Dean to elaborate a little bit more. When we first went into negotiations, I was asking for a 2-year contract. Based on our history at Waste Pro, I wanted a shorter term contract and then give options to renew if they didn't perform within that shorter term. But Waste Pro is coming back and say because of their investment they have to make to these carts and to the rollouts, they will love that 5-year versus 2. So I wanted to make sure you guys heard that, because I had represented I was looking for a shorter term contract.
Absolutely as well.
And yes, so talk to them about the investment they're gonna make and why they're asking for a 5-year minimum versus a 2-year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the industry standards for a long time. You wanted to maximize those terms out. Obviously we're just getting out of a 10-year. That's what you saw for a long time. Those were the contracts. Was the 10 years. Due to commodity pricing volatility, capital investment, which Alan just spoke to, Waste Pro elaborated to us about their capital investment, which is approximately $6.9 million in the new contract. 50% of that roughly is rollout containers that they will be providing to the customers, and the other portion, the bulk of that, is made up in new trucks, 13 new trucks.
Oh, good.
Yes, sir, and 6 of those being CNG powered vehicles and automated side loader. So we will.
So they'll go to I don't know if everybody in the city of Asheville has it, but there are some that have that side loader, which would scare me to death if I was walking on the sidewalk. But anyhow, everything seen that thing grab a hold of it, shake it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but anyhow, so my only question is, and I'm just gonna speak for me, my trash, okay, for just a minute, because I'm sure I'm not the same. I would absolutely love to have a container for my regular trash. My recyclable, I guess they would probably just bring it out, every other week. They may not be picking that up every time.
That's correct. Yes, sir. That's what we're.
Sometimes I have more recyclable than I do regular trash.
Absolutely.
It just depends on, on the week. So, are both the containers the same size?
They are, yes. And to your point with the every other week collection, you need that volume for recycling to be able to go to that type of service where you're skipping a week. Ultimately that reduced the frequency of collections in half. You cut in half, so obviously we gained some cost effectiveness there.
So are we actually gonna do that? When you go to the carts, do you go to every other week?
You do. Yeah, that's something we're working through with Waste Pro now.
Just for the recycling though.
Just for the recycling. Yeah.
Not
Trash
the garbage,
Okay,
not
just
the
for,
trash.
okay, well, that answers my question.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Every
perfect.
week trash, absolutely.
Okay, okay.
So it'll just be a portion of the fleet will be with the picking up, the rest will be traditional kind of folks throwing stuff in.
It will, but, you know, when you look at the difference from what we're doing now, you see the big piles of garbage bags on, you know, beside the street. What the transition to with the carts is, you still have the opportunity, yet a lot of that you cannot automate with just the single operator truck, but you're able to have a slinger instead of carrying bags back and forth, able to use a tote lifter on the back of the truck.
Why do a combination of the two? Why not go to all, because I think the city's system is all automated, so in some places it simply is not feasible to use.
Correct.
Layout.
We've identified, there's a lot of subdivisions, there's a lot of places where terrain allows that.
Yeah.
And we would like to see that expanded.
I can see that if you're on a slope like that, you grab that thing, you just throw it down the bank.
You know, you're looking overhead, you're looking sides, there's
You
one.
need another, you have to go.
And you're gonna get the calls.
So they'll do the automated kind of wherever it's physically possible to do
Yes.
this.
They have, Waste Pro has one automated truck now, and we're obviously looking to expand. We want to see that.
So that would be out in the unincorporated areas, but it would mainly be on the streets that are, you know, pretty much flat. But we could, but our constituents could expect to see those out there, right?
Yes. The same containers for the automated side loader situation, same containers where areas where we can't do that, where it's gonna be rear load and rear tow. So, yeah.
I think it's great that we're going to those containers.
I think so. There's some challenges we're working through with Waste Pro on identifying, can we provide different size options? We're working through that. So,
There is, and I have seen, it's not Waste Pro, but I've seen a neighbor's car, one of them, he bought 2 cans, and one's about the size of Waste Pro, then there's smaller that he bought.
Okay.
So there is 2 different sizes.
yes, sir. Yeah, the 64 gallon is used quite a bit. In communication with Waste Pro, we feel like that's something we hope that they can offer.
The big one was 64, and the other one was smaller.
Yeah, exactly. There's different options, 64, 96.
4 is a big container.
Well, 96 is the ones that the city uses now. That's what we're going to.
Oh, yeah,
The 64 is actually a little bit smaller.
yeah.
But like I said, the city does that now with 96 for
96,
trash,
yeah.
96 recycle. Yes.
Yeah, we do not generate that kind of trash.
Question on a different topic. This came up probably about a year and a half ago when Waste Pro appeared at one of our meetings. And there was an interesting back and forth about Waste Pro's policies around employing folks who might have had a criminal background, or folks who were kind of re-entering the workforce for one reason or another. Is that something that's come up at all? They had expressed some real openness around looking at ways to create employment opportunities. And just wondered if that's something that has come up in the contract discussions, or if it hasn't yet, if there would be an opportunity to revisit that with them based on what I heard. I heard some sort of real encouraging indications in that preliminary conversation about their sort of posture towards those issues.
Okay, very good. That is not something that's been nailed down at this point. It's certainly something we would have.
I'd love to hear an update from them. I sort of understood that they were gonna take some time to look at their corporate policies and what might be possible and see if there were some opportunities. So I would love an update on that.
Absolutely.
But that's an update, that's not necessarily direction, we just want, right, we just want to get some information.
And so, to me, it's one factor among many thinking, I mean, I came up when we talked with them, and I'd love to hear their
Yeah, I
perspective on it.
Absolutely. They have a very robust hiring and training program.
Yeah.
They use
They do a good job.
temporary labor service as well, so that's
Yeah.
something we can certainly.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
I mean, my comments and concern, the only thing I had with them was just making sure that they weren't, you know, working their people to death, because every time I see them, they were wide open. And, so, but anyhow, it's been a good job on the contract, working on it.
Sure have, yeah.
Yeah, and our goal, we're obviously working on the draft now. We'll obviously work with Waste Pro on the language, and we want to be back to the board in May, have a discussion.
I would support learning more about their hiring,
I
think they're already-
particularly as it does seem from conversations that I've had previously with Waste Pro that employee retention is a challenge. So are we looking at all the ways possible to retain folks so that our garbage can be picked up on time?
Sure.
So these sound really positive. I mean, I will say, going to 5 years makes me really nervous. So I just again, part of it's going to be how are we protected in that, in ways that
Sure.
we don't, you know, when things were not going well, and the last time, I think we kind of felt like, since they had this countywide franchise, we really weren't in a position to change, because, you know, the problem was trash wasn't getting picked up if we terminated the contract. Well, now the trash is really not getting picked up. So this is kind of like our one chance to make sure we, you know, we get it protected, so.
It goes back to another thing for us too, Brownie, is they're gonna go out and buy, these trucks are right around the 300,000 mark that lifts all this stuff, this trash, and packs it, so they've got to cover themselves for a certain period of time too, so, you know, and I want them to do it right, you know.
Yeah, I appreciate
We
that.
haven't had as many calls lately.
It's true.
Yeah, we've really
about
not had that.
pickups as we did have.
I think the carts would be interesting to see as
It's
we
only
measure
bigger.
this, you know, how that improves the service. I think it will. I just think the investment of
I think so too.
the
And
trucks and the carts, I think it'll improve the service.
exactly.
I really do.
And the ergonomics of the collection efforts, you know, obviously we see the efficiencies gained with their pricing proposal. I mean, they have stayed very, very competitive. And to, you know, talking about some assurances, if you will, with performance, you know, talking about the performance bond that will be in place, that's $1 million. That'll be in place throughout the duration of the contract. And there's also the liquidated damages schedule that we want to try to reinforce, you know, where performance needs to be.
And how is the pricing looking in the negotiations right now? Is it similar to where they have been, or up or down, or where
It
are we
is,
at?
when you look at, when the current contract ends this term, currently in 2019, the basic service is gonna be at 1608. That's without the cart rental. So we're honestly really close to what Waste Pro is proposing in the new contract to where we're at now. And again, that speaks to the efficiencies they feel like they gain by having everything in carts.
Okay, but there's not an additional fee for the carts.
That is incorporated.
That's part of
in
their
That's
pricing.
in the
Okay,
check.
okay.
Correct.
All
See,
right.
that's a big deal to the residents.
Absolutely.
That's a big deal. When you tell them, you know, that's.
Yeah, if they're renting a cart now, they will see very similar pricing for what they're, now, if they're not, we're gonna provide them, they're getting something, they're getting a trash, they're getting recycled. So it's very good pricing on that.
The, and I know there's a lot of challenges going on in the recycling market now with, you know, international stuff, but,
You can't sell it.
if we do this, one of the changes that will happen is that the recycling rates are gonna go dramatically up. I mean, when the city went to those 2 container systems,
Sure did,
Yeah.
I mean, that one act by itself, I think, increased recycling by like a third or something. And it was already, and Asheville already had the highest residential recycling rate in the state, and it increased dramatically from that, because it's just so easy to,
Sure.
you know. And you have enough space there, the containers are big enough that you don't, you know, it's got
You're
enough
not
to
buying bags.
accommodate it, and you don't have to deal with the
You're not
bags.
buying
Just throw
bags.
everything in there. You don't have to sort it, you don't have to,
Yeah,
just
you
put
just throw
everything
it
in
in.
there, so it's just so easy.
And we're consistent with the city at that point as well. So the
That's great.
messaging is standardized, and that's something we saw through the survey, we gotta get better on, is
Yeah.
recycling.
So you can put like the little bags you get from Ingles or wherever, you know, right?
The plastic bags,
Plastic bags, I think.
we prefer that we
No.
pull them out of the
See,
truck.
you don't do that. It's-
Okay, see, yeah. A couple weeks ago, I got wore out by my daughter, but anyway. That we were, I was just chucking them in there, you know, that we're supposed to keep those separate.
You gotta take that.
Yeah, separation, because it does contaminate the stream somewhat at the material recovery facility.
So like paper, plastic, glass, all of that, you just put all that in.
All that, just dump it in, yeah.
Yeah, loose in the container.
So what do you do with the little bags?
The little bags you're actually able to take back to grocery stores. They have drop-off bins at those locations.
Well, there you go. Y'all made my day.
All right. Any other
When I
questions?
go to the
for-
store, tell her, take them back.
Dane,
Yes, sir.
I know me and Jim's been getting emails on Clayton Road, and we've got the pictures in here again. It's been going on, what, 3 months, and I actually went out there the day after this, the fluid in that, development. It shows where they went and cleaned it up. What I didn't like was what they sent back is, the discolor, and they said it would change as the weather changes.
Oh, yeah, if it rains on it, it'll get better.
Very good, view of what they,
Yeah, that's at River Crest.
yeah.
Yeah, we've
Oh, there
been
on the right.
active on that site.
Oh,
with
okay.
Customers there.
Looked like 3
It's-
pictures.
It was a bad look. There was hydraulic fluid leaked
Yeah.
all over the road, and daggone it, if you didn't get it cleaned up, and it happened again.
Right.
So that was a tough.
Hey, all you gotta do is have them go out there and, spend the money to block that road. Gotta teach them.
And
That's what you gotta do, seriously. Seriously, if this is real,
It is.
and it's,
Yes.
and it's happened over, and you go out there and you have them, they black that road, and they do that one time, they won't let that happen again.
And that's a part of the penalty schedule as well. Hydraulic fluid is a big one. That's $1,000 right there.
And what happened here, me and John just followed them, and they stopped at the discount shoe and met a truck, and instead of fixing the line, they refilled it, and then went out and all the way down Bavard Road, it was just squirting the road out.
Yeah, that was.
And that's a maintenance, I know that, but whenever this has happened 4 times, same truck.
Good grief.
Yeah, that was something, Johnny Lee, the division manager for Waste Pro, we rode out and spoke with, some of the citizens there. And apologize, that shouldn't happen.
Well, and I think that's fine, you know, I don't wanna get too hard here on this, but I think that's fine, you know, that you can be sorry, but, that's not enough, so what we should do is build in, I mean, Robert or myself or anybody here at the table would not tolerate that at a business, and it's not that we're being ugly or anything like that, and you don't wanna put something in there where like one little thing happens and somebody freaks out and you kinda come out there and do that, but, I was probably spouting off a little bit when I said, you know, they should, you know, come out and like the whole thing, but there needs to be some accountability in there, you know, yeah, and y'all can figure that out.
Absolutely, we're working actively on that. I can say for sure, it's the attention to details, you know, we run the landfill and transfer station, we see a lot of hydraulic.
Yeah, I bet.
But you have to have the checks in place, and you have to
Right.
be able to train your drivers, this is what you look for. If you got a problem, shut it down, let's get it fixed. And I know Johnny Lee's had that problem, he's addressed that with the driver, and we're working with the community.
Well, and you know, you don't wanna, again, and I'll try to hush, but you don't wanna put all the pressure on, you know, okay, the guy that's picking up the trash and the guy that's driving, I mean, this is a money issue. These are typically money issues. If they know that, hey, you see that happen, you don't worry about it. You stop the truck, you call here, we'll bring you another truck out there and we're gonna pay the difference. You don't have to patch it up and be concerned about that to be a really good driver, you know? You know what I'm saying? Does that make
I do,
sense?
yes,
Does that make sense?
It does.
You know, that
It's-
pressure needs to be at the corporate level and at that division level to where they know they have a policy, we're gonna stop the truck, we're calling another truck, we'll fix that truck before we move it, kind of thing, so.
It is, it's incentivizing from the top down, you
Yeah.
know, we gotta get it up, we gotta get the trash and recycle up, but we gotta do things right.
But they've been very nice, Hatton. I mean, they understand that this
Oh, I'm
stuff's gonna
sure.
happen.
Yeah.
But after the 4th time, they are now getting a little more vocal.
Talking about the subdivision?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
It should be.
You should, probably.
They will have $1,000 fine for every instance in the new contract. So
Okay, there you go.
That will be.
Yeah, the liquid
There you go.
damage.
You won't have it.
If you have to pay that, you'll start paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so maybe they should pay that for that. Or,
$1,000.
you know what I'm saying, or fix it or whatever, but I don't need to get on all that, I'm sorry. Y'all, it sounds like y'all got
We're
that.
running out of time, Joe.
Huh, yeah, no.
All right,
Shut me down.
Dane,
Shut
thank
me
you
down.
so much. Appreciate the updates.
We start.
All right,
Thank
next
you,
up
Dane.
is Jennifer Barnette with the quarterly financial report process.
She's gonna go right on.
And then into the budget.
Somebody's wanting to know.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we'll start with, just want to address the financial quarterly update process. Just want to make you all aware that we are currently in our next quarter round of projections. And we will bring to you at your regular meeting on May the 7th, the next quarterly financial report. That'll be both Don Warren and myself. So just wanted to give you that information about what's forthcoming. Okay.
Pass the mouse.
Oh, yes, thank you, I may need that. So you have also a handout that makes it a little easier to follow. for this next segment. We do want to review with you today a general fund first pass expenditure budget. We believe that we are in the final month, so in the home stretch of fiscal year 2020 budget preparation. So similar to the overview that we provided to you 2 weeks ago for the first pass revenues, we're going to look at first pass expenditures. The fiscal year 2020 remaining timeline for budget adoption is outlined here. Following today's review, we have proposed to you all an April 30th budget work session. In advance of that work session, we plan to provide to you a detailed line item budget on April 23rd. This would give you all some time to review prior to coming to an April 30th session. Following the remainder of the budget calendar, schools present to the Board of Commissioners during the pre-meeting on May 7th, and a session with fire districts is scheduled for May 21st during the pre-meeting. For your regular Board of Commissioners meeting schedule, we have budget message calendared from the county manager on May 21st. The public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget scheduled for June the 4th, and budget adoption is anticipated on June the 18th. Before we review budget amounts, we've heard from you previously that it is helpful to define ledger accounts and note what they consist of. To the upper left, these are the highest level of the ledger accounts that make up expenditures. We refer to these as ledger account summaries. One exception for this list of expenditure ledger account summaries is transfers and other financing. This ledger account is used on both the expenditure and the revenue side. For the purposes of today, in our discussion around expenditures, we will focus on the dollars outlined as transfers. So specifically reviewing the ledger accounts that are a little less straightforward, we begin with program support. County Department program-specific expenses, primarily Health and Human Services, is incorporated as program support. A few examples of that is we budget for dollars in support of foster care. So we have a child who's in foster care and they may be in need of tutoring services or transportation services. We would refer to those as program support dollars. So that's why you see those live in this particular ledger account. Another example of that is dollars for economic development. Again, those are dollars in support of improving economic and social well-being for the county. We've subcategorized for you education. So program support dollars also include dollars for education. So the early childhood education dollars, the Buncombe County and Asheville City Schools local current expense dollars in the general fund, and then the dollars in support of AB Tech's operating. Those are all program support in the ledger account. Moving on to capital outlay, I want to note that in the general fund, when you see capital outlay, this is different from capital improvement plan dollars. We've chosen to budget a small amount of expenses in the general fund as capital outlay, as the expenses are annually recurring and are managed by a department. This ledger account helps to distinguish these dollars from the departmental operating. And in this instance, this is for pool resurfacing. So you'll see a small dollar amount as we move through for in capital outlay, and those are particular to pool resurfacing managed by general services. So contingency is the next ledger account I wanted to review. And while this one is straightforward, I just wanted to revisit how we arrived at contingency dollars for fiscal year 2019. Going into the final budget for fiscal year 2019, we had arrived at a budget amount. We had intentionally gone back and had discussions with departments to identify where are dollars that they would identify within their budgets that they have basically built or included as contingency. historically, departments did budget contingency within their own departmental budgets. So we took that effort underway last fiscal year and established about $1.9 million for fiscal year 2019 in contingency. So at this point in time, what I'll note as we move through the two scenarios for expenditure budget, there you will not see any contingency dollars specifically in a ledger account summary for fiscal year 20. Moving on to transfers and other financing, again, reminder that we're going to focus on the transfer piece for the expenditures. These are dollars that we budget in the general fund. They are usually recurring annually, and they are transferred to another fund to be spent for a specific purpose. Examples of that are affordable housing dollars, PayGo capital. So you'll see in fiscal year 20, we have a placeholder for PayGo capital. That did not exist in fiscal year 2019. And then another example is when we made the decision to create the tax reappraisal fund. This is a transfer amount from the general fund because that's where the dollars need to start. And then we transfer that out to another fund to be spent for a specific purpose.
So I had a question, specific question. In Ingalls, where I have a lot of my office meetings, that the money that we have recovered from lawsuits and so on, $3 million, etc., where exactly would that be placed in the budget?
Back to general fund.
It would, but where would, if someone was looking for that, where would that be? How would that, I mean, I explained it, of course, it is a, it's a 1 year, it's not recurring income, we're just receiving it this year, but, where would that specifically be placed?
So for fiscal year 2019, for those dollars that we've received during this fiscal year, miscellaneous revenues, so it's identified as a revenue, miscellaneous revenue. And because there are no specific budgeted expenses against that at the current time for the settlement dollar specific, not the insurance settlement. So the insurance settlement was different because if you'll recall, those dollars we actually received, and then that was the offsetting to the expenditure that you added to education just after budget adoption.
I'd like to pause there. We didn't actually ever vote on that. There was discussion about it, but there was never a formal vote, so. Money came in and money came out concurrently, but.
That amount, that was specifically, that amount was set aside to fund the piece that we did not give to the schools originally, so.
Yes.
I guess I just wanted to revisit, I guess, I don't want to, I know there was some discussion with County Manager Wood at the time, but I didn't understand that we took a formal vote around that. So I just want to revisit that question at some point, if we don't have time right now, at another point.
We did have a vote, because Al brought it forward that night, that we would utilize that money from, so we could go down Penium's property tax. But we would give the 17.
I'd just like to revisit the sort of particulars of, I know that those things happened on the same night, but to revisit the particulars of whether we formally appropriated.
Well, let me clear up something here. The motion that I made was simply that we would move the money aside until we met with the school systems to release it, and we did that.
Well, I think,
That was the money from the insurance.
If I'm misremembering some of the particulars, I'd just like to revisit and kind of take a look at what we actually voted on versus what was discussed. As we continue to look at this sort of set of the 3.1 million or so.
And Commissioner Beach-Ferrara, I'll be glad to go back and kind of build a narrative around kind of how that happened,
Yeah.
and then the dates of the meetings and the budget amendments that occurred, and I'll be glad to send that out to you.
so that money went to help fund that. That money
Well,
went to offset
money-
that.
Technically, it did.
So you would,
So you were able to
Yes.
basically not appropriate additional fund balance
yes.
at that time when you then brought back the half cent to schools.
Yes.
So the timing of that, you
you did not have to appropriate additional fund balance because you did have those revenues.
Because it was additional money that was not in the budget.
I don't know, I'm not quite satisfied, and I don't want to belabor this, but I do want us to be really careful and precise about if and how we are specifically appropriating any of the funds that were recovered. There certainly was a general discussion that night. The funds, if I put $100 in my bank account and I go to Ingles and buy $100 worth of groceries, you could say that $100 purchases $100 of groceries, or it could have been the other $100 that was sitting there. I just want to make sure that we can be very clear with the community about this is the funds we recovered, and this is, if we have made any specific appropriations of that funds, here's what it's for, and here's how we did that. And it might just be sort of fuzzy. The fuzziness of time and a lack of sleep. Some details are escaping me right now, but I would love a chance to revisit that before we kind of narrate that was in fact the decision the board made by vote.
Well, I mean, it's a simple question, you're asking, in my opinion, is, we just go and look at how that money was placed and where it was placed. It's a pretty simple question.
We'll go back and pull the record, and we'll have that at your next meeting, because we plan on having a conversation about budget every pre-meeting, so our next pre-meeting, that'll be the first topic for clarification, and then we can get into those schools conversation.
And I think it's great we're asking a question, that, if the money comes in, where does it go? And the public asks the question, and that money's coming in, where's it going? They just want to know where it's going.
Well, but I think, we can kind of get too hung up on this in some ways, because reality is we're appropriating funds for all these different discretionary things that we can fund from our general fund. Our general fund is comprised of revenue from a variety of sources, right? So to just say it's from this, I think your point about if you already had $1,000 in your bank account, you got $100 and you spent $100, which part of that $1,000 did it come from? It's just us saying things. You can, if you got it from 5 different sources, which one you're claiming is kind of and not the right way to think about it.
We would agree with that, except for when we brought the budget, it had specific line items that you did appropriate, and that's what we did with the fund. And when this additional money came in, the intent was not to go to fund balance your savings account, to your point, and take more money. We took that specific money that came from the insurance settlement and use it to fund schools. Because we didn't fund schools at 100% to start with. We said, and we go back and pull the records, but what I'll be looking at is we said, when that money comes, we will then replenish the schools and not go to fund balance. So yes, it's a different pot of money and a lot of sources going in, but we were specific in how we spend that money. We didn't go back to the other sources, we went back to that money from the schools.
Well, I guess, and people might have thought about it differently. When we increase funding for schools, that's now the base level of funding for schools, right? For forever, right? So using one-time revenue to do something like that, if we did do that, I think that's probably the wrong way to think about it, because we're going to have to, we're not, the school funding's not going to go down. It's going to go the same or up. So,
well, this was a little different. Since we got on it, we ended up not fully funding the schools where they asked, okay, and then we ended up supplying that money later, so this money comes with that. So that's kind of the way it happened.
But Bernie's also right, that was a one-time pot of money that now becomes reoccurring. So we do need to be systematic in how we think about that funding going forward.
That's true.
So,
All right.
And to Commissioner Belcher's point, so any other settlement dollars in fiscal year 19 with no identified offsetting expenditure purpose fall through to fund balance, so it becomes part of your savings. And again, it's one-time revenue.
All right, cool. That's what I'll tell them.
Okay. So in order for us to arrive at a first pass expenditure scenario, we start with outlining the dollars requested across departments and for these ledger accounts. The total requested budget began at $344,810,682. This represents a 6.45% overall growth of expenditures in comparison to fiscal year 2019 amended. We will come back to some more specific details around these ledger accounts and growth, but how do we get here? So when we began the fiscal year 2020 budget planning cycle, there was strong encouragement by leadership for departments to identify and ask for what they need. More specifically, if you'll remember, Interim County Manager George Wood asked for departments to review their budgets and include in their request positions and operating that are needed. This was in recognition that across the organization, there was historical disparity of funding organizational needs across departments, and in some instances, not to the level of a sustainable practice. In addition to this, the conclusion of the Evergreen Pay and Classification Study has highlighted differences and inequities across the organization in comparison for pay and classification, as well as in comparison to market rate for some. This has accelerated attention to the need for the organization to develop an overarching pay and compensation philosophy. At the direction of the county manager, and with HR leading the focus, efforts are underway, inclusive of staff participation across the organization, for a proposed pay and compensation philosophy. Additional items that you will see captured in the requested budget are cost of living adjustment, health insurance claims cost growth, and strategic priorities. In association with departments determining their needs and following the Evergreen study, we received 177 position-related requests, 69 new position requests, 61 salary adjustment requests, and 48 reclassification requests. In the requested budget, we have captured the 1.77 cost of living adjustment, accounted for the increased costs associated with rising health insurance claims costs, included the early retirement incentive costs effective fiscal year 2020. We've accounted for the increase in employer retirement contribution rate as dictated per state requirements, and education funding increased at the same growth rate as fiscal year 2019 in the requested budget. We've additionally accounted for the net increase request for early childhood education at $2.65 million to be able to reach the $3.6 million commitment. We've included $925,000 needed to fulfill the fiscal year 2020 commitment for East Haven, and then incorporated a placeholder for future consideration of $1.4 million in recognition of the continued conversation around affordable housing. Accounting for these items, the total expenditure growth from fiscal year 2019 amended to fiscal year 2020 requested is $20.8 million.
You said the education increase is the, say that again, please, how much you got here?
So,
Placeholder.
yes, so the placeholder in requested, because we will move to a first pass scenario, was the same growth rate in this version, would have been the same growth rate that was from fiscal year 18 to 19, and that was 4.3%.
So the same percentage we increased from last year is assumed in this year's budget.
In this version. So this is still requested. I'm gonna walk us through, like, here are the full requests, and then we're gonna step down to what we're calling our first pass. So there are definitely some things that we know we could not recommend, and we go to the first pass.
So this is a heart attack number, and then we go from here, right?
That's correct.
I'm still having a heart attack. That's okay.
Got it. I'm with you. Good strategy.
So comparing the percentage growth from fiscal year 2019 amended in each ledger account, salary and benefits experiences a 10.06% growth. Again, a reminder, this was all position requests incorporated, so the very beginning. At 3.19% operating, again, that's inclusive of all departmental operating requests. Again, program support dollars includes both county department associated dollars and education dollars in the program support. The county department program support decreased by 5.05%, which relates to a significant decrease for economic development from the amended budget. If you'll remember, we carried forward dollars from fiscal year 18 into fiscal year 19 specific to an economic incentive that they did not meet the benchmark in 18, but potentially to meet it in 19, we needed to roll those dollars forward. So then what you see is that a lower amount needed for fiscal year 20. That's why you see the decrease of 5.05%. We also did some realignment, if you'll remember hearing from Rachel Nygaard. where we did in the requested budget some realignment from strategic partnership dollars for affordable housing. So we moved them from strategic partnership for affordable housing, which then show up in the transfer budget. Education in this scenario is a 7.07% increase related to early childhood education net increase of the 2.65 and the education funding increase. The percent increase reflected for capital outlay indicates a 23.76% growth. That sounds really high, but when you look at the dollars, it's $22,080. So it looks high because of the percentage basis. You see the decrease by 100%, as I referenced earlier, around it removes all contingency dollars in this current moment. And then there's a 4.32% increase in debt service, and that's related to our current obligations and anticipated debt issuance for the fiscal year 2019 approved projects that will be issued in coming months. 29.24% is the increase for transfers. And again, this is related to new additional dollars for affordable housing, 2.3 million. And then again, there's the tax reappraisal fund that's new. Knowing that the percentage growth for expenditures is outpacing the percentage growth for revenues, we needed to look strategically and determine what it is that we can support and include in the first pass expenditures and what we need to exclude. We've arrived at a first pass expenditure budget. This is the less of a heart attack. So the first pass in comparison to the requested budget is a decrease of $3.9 million, or a total expenditure amount of $340,881,625.
Why did the education go up?
And I'm going to review I'll review all of those if
All right.
detail if that's okay. So the reduction is attributed to most all salary and benefit requests not approved. So you can see, just focusing on the variance here where we started with requested, and by not supporting all of the salary and position requests, we reduced by the net of 3.9. And I'll get into the details about some of the areas that went up. In an effort to begin addressing our variance and work towards a balanced budget, we have not recommended the approval of new positions, with the exception of proposing 10 new positions for the sheriff's office, the 9 care management positions that you just heard Stoney reference, which is revenue neutral, 1 trade specialist position for general services, and the reallocation of a position for the assistant county manager. There are 3 pending salary adjustment requests where the departments are working to identify an offsetting reduction in their operating budget to have a neutral impact on the budget.
Do you have the numbers on these? Like if we looked at sheriff's office, it's at, 400,000, or is it, 2 million?
So for the sheriff's office, it is just over 700,000. Is that the one you're specifically looking for?
We should have it on all of them.
We can get that.
I can,
Just the total.
sure.
Breakdown on health.
Yeah, I mean, so,
And those are definitely items that we would plan to incorporate into our next round of budget discussions. And if you want them earlier, we'll be glad to do that as well.
just estimates.
Sure. So with the adjustments to include only the approved positions, you can see that the most significant shift from requested to first pass was the reduction to a 7.07% salary and benefit growth instead of 10.06.
So, sorry, when you say on salaries and benefits, do you have, like when you go back at the first pass, or this, originally you had X number of positions, and then you had increases in pay. and that was the combination, the two. Then when you dropped it 4 million, there's no distinction. Does that mean that there's less people, or does that mean people don't get paid as much? I mean,
So the requested scenario incorporated those 177 position-related requests.
Yeah.
So the requested scenario incorporated those fully loaded costs. So then when we went back and we said, we can only support or recommend these, then we arrived at a new salary and benefit dollar amount, which was then a reduction of $4 million. So we had to make a decision that we could not approve or recommend $4 million worth of those requests.
150 positions?
Right, so what?
Because you're 177 and,
Was included in that first
yeah,
bucket.
yeah,
so
then you're saying you can do 20.
But only 69 were new positions.
We didn't
Sorry,
fund those
thank you.
69 new
69 are new
Right,
positions, all right,
right.
thanks.
We did not.
No, we only did the
20.
10 for the sheriff's office, the 9 for Stoney, which is
Right,
revenues
see
washing
that.
that out,
Okay,
yes.
so that's from the 61.
That's from the 69 that was
So
in there, yes.
69.
So 49
69, yeah.
proposed new positions would not be funded under this scenario.
Correct. And the salary adjustment that I truly believe is needed from the departments is not recommended as well.
Okay.
So it's still a big growth though, so it's like $10 million more. So if we're not doing
Yeah,
that
I'm
many
trying to figure that
positions
out.
and not doing salary changes, why is it so much more?
So so if I can talk through just a
Okay.
little bit about the
Yeah.
operating
Yeah.
growth, then I definitely
Sure.
can get into that. So Commissioner Belcher, you asked around operating and then the education. So operating grew by a net amount. So from requested to first pass, it grew. Why? And the net amount of that increase was $107,850. This is due to the addition of $479,400 in recommended organization-wide IT needs. If you'll recall, the capital and IT planning process began in February, and the final recommendation is entered into first pass. So it wasn't completed at the time of requested. We now have a recommended IT. What are the IT needs across the organization? What do we need to recommend? And then that's included in first pass. So this amount of increase, so the $479,000 that it went up, is then offset by a reduction in the departmental operating requests that were not recommended. The recommended IT requests span the organization and include items that ensure continued physical security at the detention center, system and data security, workflow efficiencies, and equal access to wireless connectivity. Going on to program support, where education lives. Program support for departments reflects a 5.14% decrease related to, again, the move of strategic partnership dollars for affordable housing, a reduction to an economic development, and we identified another minor adjustment from strategic partnership to economic development, and that was specific to a request for sports commission. Education is an overall 7.31% increase, so that's a total of $6.2 million over our amended budget. The increase for Buncombe County Schools, Asheville City Schools, and AB Tech is proposed at the unrestricted revenue growth rate, which we shared with you all previously, and has been shared with the schools as the proposed education funding formula. And then additionally included in that is a net increase for early childhood ed. So Commissioner Belcher, in requested, the rate at which they received an increase, education received an increase from 18 to 19 was higher than the 4.24% calculated unrestricted revenue growth rate. So from first pass, we had Asheville City and Buncombe County Schools in. That actually decreases based on that decrease in the unrestricted revenue growth rate. But then what we did incorporate in conversation with the county manager at the current time is applying that same percentage to AB Tech in this scenario. that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was done to keep, I mean, there may be some years that they ask for more, but my concern is that when you put a percentage out there, that you're gonna get asked for that every time. And we just wanna make sure that we build a budget that's fair to them and fair to the, taxpayer at the same time. That's the only challenge I would give with saying that we got a 4% revenue growth, okay, cool, we're gonna spend that.
Sure. And
So
what I'll say
that's
is that,
scary.
the education formula, from my perspective, it definitely gives the schools and it gives us kind of a placeholder amount. So we go into the budget planning process knowing that education comes really late, but it's definitely an opportunity for us to have at least some sort of a barometer around what that potential funding would be.
I mean, the amount that we've increased funding over the last 5 or 6 years has definitely exceeded overall growth of revenue. So if we stick to this policy, it would slow the increase of funding, which I think is generally the right place to be. I'm glad we've done what we've done, but we've done some teacher pay raises. I mean, we've done some things that we don't have to do that order of magnitude going forward. Where it'll be tougher, I mean, this year it sounds like it won't be that hard because it's pretty good revenue growth, so the schools will probably be pretty happy with the number. It'll be harder when we're having a year when revenue increases are a lot lower. If it's only 1% or 2%, that's where that conversation will be more challenging, right? So that's not this year, so yay.
Yeah, you just don't want them to get in a situation where they're, having recurring needs, and then you get, whacked with a 1% growth, So, I don't know, it's great discussion, it's, a tough thing to walk through, so.
I mean, I guess in a way, like and not that you can tell future county commissions what to do, but I mean, in some ways, would you, like if you're having a good year from a revenue standpoint, would you want to say to the schools, hey, why don't we not fund you that full amount this year, but if you're ever having a lean year, we'll try to do more, right? So it's kind of a little bit more leveled out, but that's, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to, again, we can't tell county commissions what to do in the future, but so from a policy standpoint, maybe this is the best way to approach it, so.
It's a good start.
And as Jennifer said, it gives you some predictability
Sure
for what we
does.
need to plan for.
Yeah.
But when they come to you, I'm sure there will be requests to be more than that 7% that we have there. But my ask of you would be not to commit right away. We need to really go back because there's a lot of core functions that we're saying no to when we talked about those 177 positions that we can't afford to fund this year.
Well, but for the city and county and AB Tech, we're saying it's 4.4%, right?
4.24.
4.24%.
Which is the growth in our revenue, so
Yeah.
we're passing that growth on to them
Yeah.
and not truly looking at our core functions internally as well. So,
Jennifer,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to commend you and your staff because for the first time since I've been on the county commission, at budget time, I'm beginning to feel homesick, like I'm back at the bank, because I feel that we're getting it where it should be. We have good projections, we have something to look, we're looking at it the way we should look at a budget, because I felt some before it was smoke and mirrors sometimes, when you go around. But thanks it's a good job. I know I understand.
Absolutely. I mean, we definitely want to take the opportunity to begin engaging you in that conversation much earlier.
Right, and I appreciate that.
And I'll go ahead and give a shout out to Matt Evans and Sam Riddle are also here from budget, so
Good. Yeah, all
pass
of
the
it.
thanks on to them as well.
All right, is that it?
I'm going to finish out just really quickly for you. So you'll notice that there's no percent change from requested to the first pass scenario for capital outlay and debt service. No changes there. Transfers decreased by a small percentage from requested due to a reduction from the initial requested amount for transportation fund dollars, as planning continues efforts to maximize revenues to offset increased operating costs. So in the requested, there was an additional amount over the usual dollars that are provided from the general fund to support transportation. And again, that's kind of still a work in progress, but for the purposes of this scenario, we have reduced that increase out. So these changes, for comparison to requested, reduce the expenditure growth from 6.45 to 5.24. The total expenditure growth for first pass compared to 2019 amended is $16,965.72. So we will continue work, continue evaluation for proposed revenues and expenditures with the plan to create basically a second pass. We will look to provide you all with a line item detailed budget on April the 23rd in preparation for the work session, hopefully for April 30th.
So that's gonna ask of you is, you'll be available for a work session on April 30th? Our plan right now is around 11, so 11 till 2, I think we discussed, right?
We'll be here.
11 till 2, and we would serve lunch at 12, so you take a quick break and then you come back and finish up that session.
On April 23rd.
April 30th.
30th.
April 30th,
The
sorry.
23rd is
They'll
just for
send it
delivery
to
of the
us.
file to you.
Got it, thank you. Yep.
I'm gonna be on maternity leave with a baby, so I might need to call in for a portion of it. Maternity leave for my day job, from the county, so I can attend, but some of it might be
You might
virtual.
need a relief to bring the baby.
I can bring the babies if y'all want, if it's here.
You need some relief.
You said 11 to 2?
Yes.
11 to 2.
Gotcha.
Would a different time of day be any better? Okay. All right.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. One thing I just want to comment on, so we have the schools, the city and county and AV Tech all coming in on May 7th to talk to us about their budget. So I love the idea of having them all, kind of like having all the education partners here on the same day to dig into all that. You know, they'll have their budget requests and when I go over that. You know, there's been a few recent meetings with some of the folks from the city schools and some commissioners, I guess probably mostly folks from, well, not just District 1, because I know they've been talking to other folks too, and about the achievement gap issue in the city schools. So I was in a couple of those meetings. They went through a lot of detail around, you know, the statistics from all the different schools, and I appreciate them being, you know, very forthcoming about the data. It's terrible. I mean, it is
worse.
It is a very serious issue. So I know it sparked a lot of conversations in the community around these issues, which are not new. And but again, we're not where we want to be at all in terms of those issues. I've also reached out to the county schools, you know, to try to get a better sense of like, well, how are our county schools doing in this? Are we seeing any more progress there, or are the numbers just as bad? So anyway, this is just to say that you know, when Al and I and Avril attended one of the meetings along with some staff to hear the achievement gap data from the city schools, it's a very good discussion. Part of our feedback to them was, you know, this is a discussion that should be happening with the full county commission because everyone's interested in this. And so, you know, we're going to have those folks with us for the budget presentation. And I've really encouraged them to, of course, you know, talk to us about their budget proposals. But, you know, this is an opportunity for us also as a full body to talk to them about some of those issues with the city schools. I've also I reached out to the county to see if they might want to have some informal discussions too, and they said, well, let's just talk about those issues when we come to talk to the county commission as well. It's a chance to talk to everyone. So this is just to say that during this budget process, I really hope we can kind of spend some time talking about those important issues in our schools too, since we'll have all the right folks in the room.
So you believe that they'll be prepared to do that?
I think they will. I've certainly let them know that I think it's something the commission's very interested in, and I think I was having an email with Tony Baldwin about this just a couple days ago. I think I'll also send him some specific questions I'm hoping they can be kind of prepared to talk to when they come to the meeting, and I'll copy everyone on that. So just to anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Commissioner?
Yes.
One of the things I did right after I heard the school's presentation is I asked the county schools if we can send the charts that the city used, and they would use the same format by schools. Tell us how many whites, how many blacks will pass the EOGs at different grades. And he said he'd be willing to do that, but he's not sure what timeline he would be able to get that done, so.
Can we ask for that by sub-district? I think throughout the county, that's gonna look different in Reynolds versus North Buncombe versus Owen. et cetera, instead of
And
looking
even
at the
our-
district as a whole, or when
Well,
Inca.
we asked by schools, because the city gave it to
Yeah.
us by schools,
They
so we're
did
asking
that by
them to
schools.
by schools.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
same
they broke
format,
it
so we're
down by
looking at apples
school.
to apples.
That's great.
So what that would take care of?
You know, one of the other things that, you know, that we talked about in this meeting that Al and I were in recently was just about what the city schools are doing with the supplemental tax funding that they
Right.
get, right? So they have that, I think it's currently at 12 cents or 10 cents, I can't remember.
12 cents.
12 cents.
12 cents.
So that's a, you know, significant additional source of funding that they get above and beyond the funding that we
Plus-
provide to, you know, to both systems. So, you know, and
Plus,
the,
by being a taxing organization, they get another $3 million, and I didn't realize.
sales tax,
In
right.
sales tax, it was that high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you know, the county commission is charged with setting that tax rate. And usually, you know, it moves, you know, around a little bit, but it's been in the neighborhood of where it's at today for, you know, for quite a while. But one of the things that we ask the city schools is to really kind of provide a more comprehensive kind of explanation for how the city school supplemental funds are being invested, you know, particularly through the achievement gap, but also just for overall school operations. Usually when they come talk to us in the budget process, it's, you know, saying if we would increase it a penny or two, here's what we would do with it, right? So we're just kind of talking about some incremental differences. I don't think we've ever really gotten kind of a full explanation for just how is the overall supplemental funds used more generally compared to, like, what does it enable the city district to do that, for example, the county district, which doesn't have a supplemental property tax, can't do. So those are some of the other questions I've encouraged them to really come in and talk about to us in more detail than we have done in the past. So just wanted to share some of those thoughts about the education piece. Any other feedback or thoughts on the process going forward?
Did you have any questions on the actual agenda for tonight, or you're good with that? The one for tonight?
I don't think
pretty
I have
I think it's
any.
pretty
We could
simple,
be,
yeah.
we could be out here like remarkably early
Yeah.
tonight if we decide to.
Only thing I have on tonight's agenda is we're giving some cards to a group down on Merriman Avenue. And since Wanda Green was our county manager, Broad River's been looking for a car. And out of this group of cars that we're supposedly going to give to somebody, the Durango in there is something that they would like to have in Broad River. Because it's big enough that they can send people to classes, because there's only 2 people that are full paid at Broad River, and they got 26 volunteers. So I would like to make sure whatever we do, we pull that Durango out of there and give it to Broad River.
So, which I wouldn't have a problem with that, but where is it, and I know I'm looking at it, where is that? It's gotta be in the consent agenda somewhere, is it in the?
No, it's under new business, under surplus personal property.
Oh, okay, that's
our
right.
Surplus
I'm
personal
sorry.
property down there. And
Okay,
it's
got
going
it.
to a nonprofit, and I don't agree with that because, I have to go online to bid on products from Buncombe County, just like anybody else in this room is. And then when you're a nonprofit, we're talking about letting them come in and buy afterwards without going through GovCo. That's taxpayers' money. What we're doing here is trying to help emergency services. You know, we got one going to, the one in Alexandria, and then Broad River's been asking for one way before that, so, he's put down the information, I think Tim's got it too, that, he would like to have this Durango.
Alexander's getting the Explorer. Okay. And
So that one came before us, and that's why it's on there. I didn't hear about the other until now recently, so that's why it's not on there. So if the commission so wishes, we could pull that item,
I'd like,
but that will be a vote of the commission at this point because it has been posted.
yeah.
We have to comply with the rules, so you guys have to make a decision tonight to vote on that issue.
So I, you know, the Working Wheels folks, I think, plan to have someone at the meeting who can kind of give a little bit of a presentation about what the organization does. And so I would encourage us to hear it. I mean, we can decide to do it or not do it, but I'd encourage us to let them give a short presentation about how their organization works. It is a little bit different than just, we've got a lot of great nonprofits here and, you know, volunteer fire districts who have who could use vehicles from time to time. Working Wheels is not really about them keeping the vehicles for their organization. Their mission is getting low-cost vehicles into to people in the community who need a working vehicle. So they're not keeping it for a nonprofit purpose. Their whole reason for existing is to kind of help people access them. So, and we could, if we decide to, we could use a few of our vehicles every year to partner with them in that effort. But let's get the information, and if we're decide, yeah, that's a great idea, or no, it's not a great idea, or let's take some more time, we can kind of decide how to
I went
do
by
that.
and looked at it, and they don't really have anything down there, except a bunch of just cars that they need to take and get them crushed. I've got pictures of it in my phone.
Yeah, they're loaded up pretty heavy with vehicles sitting on the side of the road there.
I'm sorry, who is?
Working Wheels.
Okay, well, why don't we,
There are probably 40 vehicles plus
There's a whole
there right
bunch.
now.
okay.
Let me ask a question though. We're talking about two different things on it. One is Working Wheels, but before that, I think if we have a volunteer fire department who needs one of our vehicles, let's give it to them.
Yeah.
And then the others, we can look at for Working Wheels or whatever.
Well, I
But
think
if
we need to
broad
put them
equipment-
on GovCo, because nobody can, just because you're a nonprofit don't mean you get something from the county for free. I can't, I gotta buy a computer on GovCo if I wanna buy one, or I gotta buy a car on GovCo, and I'm a dealer, okay? So, that's the way that I look at it.
Well, let's listen. I agree, but let's listen to them at least here, yeah.
I guess we have to, because
Yeah,
it's on the agenda.
Yeah,
Of course, I hadn't seen or heard anything about it prior to this going on the agenda, so.
we discussed it,
Working Wheels?
Yeah.
Nobody
Did we
can-
really?
yeah.
Working
Yes.
Wheels?
Yeah, we talked about it here. Also, several commissioners have asked to put it on the agenda, so we've got,
I got it,
done that
okay,
too.
it's back.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have a good conversation, and on the fire districts, I'm open to that too. I do think it would be good for us to try to, if it's something we think we're gonna do periodically, my only question is like, what's the right process to do
Yeah.
that? So we're not just kind of like, doing it for some people but not others, just what's a fair policy to think about how to do that over time.
I consider
Um,
that policy.
Hey, one other thing we wanted to add to the agenda tonight, that's not on the agenda, and so we'll need to do this by consensus, is that Land of Sky would like to do a presentation about a public survey process they're taking for rural broadband access. So it should be 10 minutes or less.
We all found that.
Great. I have just one other question. How are we advertising these meetings?
I will turn to Lamar and Fruit on that one.
They go on the county commissioner's website, on the calendar. We don't have an agenda, we don't do an agenda for it. So it doesn't go on the list of regular, as it says on the, website, commissioner's website. It doesn't list it's not a regular agenda meeting, so it goes on the actual, calendar on the side. We have the calendar, but we don't, because we've already scheduled these meetings and it went by resolution, there is no regular advertisement other than like the special meeting that we normally do, because it's not a special meeting anymore.
So I think we should try to make sure people are aware of these meetings, right? Because this is our full group meeting. We're spending 2 hours here, a lot of great staff here. I know a lot of great information is coming out. So I kind of feel like we should advertise these on our website like our regular meetings, because it's just the only thing we're not doing is we're not voting on anything here. But these are substantive commission meetings. So I'm just wondering.
It's on the regular website, it's on the commissioner website. It's just, where we normally have agendas, it's not a regular meeting agenda, so we don't put it there. But if you look on the schedule, there's a calendar on the side that has meetings scheduled, and it is there. If we need to do something differently, we can. If we need to make
I see the calendar now. Because I normally just kind of click on the link to see what's on the meeting, and it goes to the 5 o'clock stuff. So I wonder.
And that doesn't get settled off until near the time of this.
He's up on.
Brandon, we can't even get people to do the meeting upstairs.
We had
How
some
we gonna
people
come down here?
We can't make people do anything, Mike. I just want to make sure people know what we're doing.
They know we're
They can
up there.
choose. Well, let's just, I mean, I would just say, maybe we should continue to think about this. I'm not saying we should post the agenda for this like a full week ahead like we do the other ones, but maybe to some extent, if we do kind of know what we're gonna talk about, we would
And I can stand.
get it out there so folks who might be interested in it, would see, oh, they're gonna be talking about,
Well,
they're gonna be talking about the budget today. Like, a lot of people might find that actually kind of interesting to come in and see what,
well, it's
We're
nothing, it's nothing opposed to us sending out, like we would send out a special meeting request. I can send it out to, like, it would be a special meeting request, but it wouldn't be a special meeting. Just notice that we're having a meeting at
Now start targeting.
12 o'clock. We could do
Information, so information versus a special meeting, we'll send a
Right.
notice out letting them know the meeting's out.
Yeah.
that. Nothing says,
right.
nothing says
That's right.
that we couldn't do that
Yeah.
if we decided, if the board decided. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we should do that. And I think to the extent that we do know what's gonna be on the agenda, I think we should publicize that so that people can, if we're gonna be doing this indefinitely, then, some of the people who are interested in county commission work are gonna start, knowing, like, you need to go to that meeting, because they're gonna talk about the budget, they're gonna talk about, creating a recreation board. Like, that's the first time we've ever talked about it. Like, there's people who are interested in this kind of stuff,
The
so.
only difference is they're not given, they don't take public comment.
Yeah,
And we don't vote.
We don't vote, so they're just gonna listen.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
okay.
That's right.
It's a rare bird who might wanna do that, but they might be out there.
All right. Okay, we don't have anything else. I think we're adjourned.